Hello everybody, welcome back along to Five Sisters Zoo. My name's Adam. I'm delighted that you guys have decided to tune in for our final week of online lessons. So the last online lesson that we will be making available will be available this Thursday. And this week we are looking at something completely different. We're shifting things up a little bit. So we've spent some time speaking about habitats and adaptations. We've spoken about the rainforest in quite a lot of depth. We've looked at teeth, diet and food chains. And we've also, just last week, had a real in-depth look at animal classification. This week, we are going to be speaking about the role of a zoo. Something a little bit different, the role of a zoo. And then on Thursday, we're going to focus a little bit more on the roles within a zoo. So what does a zookeeper do? What does our animal registrar spend their time doing? So that's coming on Thursday. But today we're focusing on the role of a zoo. So we're going to be speaking about all things animal welfare. We're going to be speaking about conservation work that zoos get involved with these days. We're going to be speaking about zoo education and a little bit about research as well, because those are some of the most important roles of a zoo. We have a lot of animal inhabitants here at Five Sisters, and I'm sure if you've never been along to Five Sisters Zoo before, you'll have been to a zoo somewhere in the world at some point in your lives. And I'm sure that many of you will have enjoyed your day out. It's absolutely fascinating going along to a zoo and seeing these wonderful animal species up close. But zoos are really important for all the things I've just mentioned, for conservation, education, research. We are the people that are here to inspire you guys. And hopefully we do a good job at that. So we are here to inspire you, to tell you in a time of global biodiversity crisis that you can still go out there and do something about some of the issues facing wildlife around the world. And whilst we do that, we're also here to help protect species that are maybe vulnerable or endangered in their native habitats. We help by taking part in breeding programs. We help by raising money for organisations that are working in different parts of the world. And we're going to tell you all about that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our feed room now, and we're going to meet with our head keeper Gemma, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the kind of day-to-day work that goes into keeping such a wide variety of species and goes into making sure that animal welfare needs are met. So we've come across to our feed room to meet with Gemma, who is our head keeper. It's Gemma's job to make sure that the welfare needs of all of the species that live here at Five Sisters are met. It's quite a challenge, I'm sure, and we're going to hear from Gemma in a second or two about what that means. So Gemma, you obviously have quite a lot of animals under your care. What does your day normally look like?
Yeah, so it's a really busy day. So all the zookeepers, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the first job we do is going around the sections and checking every single animal is okay, everyone's accounted for, that their enclosures are the right temperature, because that's really important, especially for our more tropical species, that the heaters haven't broke or anything overnight. We're checking that they've still got fresh water, and that the groups of, especially like the primates and monkeys, that the groups are still getting on okay. And then after everyone is checked on and okay, the next thing is to collect all the feed for the animals, and I go around cleaning them out. So there's a lot of cleaning to do, giving them fresh water and putting their feeds in. And the whole time we are cleaning them out and putting their feeds in, we're also checking and observing the animals the whole time to check that they're healthy, there's no wounds and there's no sign of illness. And then also when we're giving them the feeds, we sometimes do a bit of training with them, and that is really important. That builds a positive relationship with the animals, which helps us care for them, and it means that they're doing things voluntarily. So things like sitting on a scale, it is on their terms, they get a little reward for it, and we're able to check that they're a nice and healthy weight. And then we're also doing enrichment as well as we go around, and so enrichment is really important to promote their natural behaviours. So that could be anything from little puzzle feeders to also things like new smells, new branches to climb, or anything new in their environment which helps stimulate natural behaviours. So also things like mirrors are great, they find them really interesting. And then once we finish feeding and cleaning, there is a lot of chopping up food to do to make the next feeds. So to do that, you just saw me in there chopping up feeds. Every animal has its own diet, which has been really carefully worked out for all its nutritional needs. So really similar to what they get in the wild, to make sure they're getting all the right vitamins and minerals, and it's weighed out to the gram to make sure they're getting exactly what they need. And that does take a couple of hours every day, just preparing all the food, before we then go around and feed everyone again and check they're all okay before leaving for the night.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. It sounds like quite a busy day. Does it tend to kind of vary? So there's some days that are completely different from the last?
Yeah, so although we've got the same feeding and cleaning to do every day, it really depends on the day for the animals. So obviously sometimes they are ill, so then they need medications or maybe to go and see the vet. And some days you might be rebranching an enclosure for the monkeys. And there's just always lots and lots of different jobs that need doing.
And you mentioned there, you guys at home will have heard this, Gemma mentioned enrichment in order to try and kind of bring out some of the natural behaviours of the species that we have living here at Five Sisters. And I've already mentioned to you guys that zoos are really, really important now for conservation. They're important animal welfare sites as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about enrichment? Can you give us some examples of enrichment that you look after the primates a lot of the time here at the zoo? So what kind of enrichment might you put in with some of the monkeys or lemurs that we have here on site?
Yeah, so it can be the best thing about enrichment is you need to do a variety of things. So there's lots of different puzzle feeders to make it harder for them to get the food, hanging up the food on different branches, or also things like new things in the environment, so new branches, new bits of rope, or a new wobble platform for them to use. They are normally quite effective, or things like different smells as well, putting different herbs or even perfumes in, which just make the environment more varied.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We're really lucky. We've actually been invited along to feeding time at the Meerkat enclosure, and we're going to have a kind of close look at them in a second or two within the habitat that we've created for them here at Five Sisters, and I'll discuss just how important the habitat here at the zoo is for educational purposes as well, and why we try to design our animal habitats here in such a way that they mirror the habitats that would normally be found living in other parts of the world. So thank you very much, Gemma. We're going to head up to the Meerkat enclosure with some mealworms now. So we've had a bit of a chat about animal welfare there with Gemma and how important it is that we feed our animals the correct food. We've had a little look at that feed room there where all that food prep takes place. Now we've got some mealworms here. We've been lucky enough to be invited over for the mealtime here in the Meerkat enclosure. And the Meerkat enclosure is an enclosure that some of you guys might already be quite familiar with. And remember, in one of our earlier tasks, back I think in the first week of our lessons, we asked you guys to design a new habitat for our meerkats. And remember, we had a bit of we mentioned to you that meerkats were normally found living in deserts and grasslands over there in southern Africa. And you can see from the enclosure that I'm sitting in right now, that is exactly what we've based this enclosure here off of. So we've provided our meerkats with this fantastic desert-like habitat. And that is a really, really important thing for the meerkats, but also for the kind of educational value here at the zoo as well. So making sure that our visitors come along and they can see their animals in a habitat that mirrors the habitat they would normally be found living in, in other parts of the world. So we're joined by our meerkat group here just now. We've got some mealworms for them here today, so they're getting some of these mealworms. Meerkats love to eat lots of insects. They're also going to eat some fruits and vegetables, some plant life sometimes as well. Occasionally they might eat some small birds, some things like eggs too. And it's really, really important that these guys have that balanced diet that we obviously mentioned just a few minutes ago. And that is a really big, important part of a zookeeper's role. And we're going to be discussing that a little bit more in depth on Thursday. These guys are absolutely fantastic. You can see them kind of moving around here just now. And obviously here at the zoo, behind me in this rock, there's all these little tunnels. Meerkats over there in southern Africa, they are going to spend quite a lot of time underground. If there's any predators nearby, these guys, one of them will let out a little alarm call, and they'll all disappear down underground into these tunnels. And we've provided them with tunnels like that here at the zoo so that they can behave as naturally as possible. That's what we want for all of the species that we house here. We want them to behave naturally. We want them to give them the opportunity to thrive, and any good zoo will do exactly that. So you'll find that we've given our meerkats this fantastic savanna-like habitat. If you come along to Five Sisters and you see things like our Dabraza monkeys that normally live high up off the ground, we've provided them with lots of kind of climbing opportunities, a nice tall enclosure that they can go right to the top of. And that's what zoos really have to do, both for the animal welfare side of things, but also for the educational side of things as well, making these habitats look as real as possible so that visitors coming into the zoo can get a real idea of where these animals come from and how they interact with their habitats as well. guys are particularly hungry this afternoon. So what we're going to do now, guys, is we are going to head out of the Meerkat enclosure. We're going to head down to our fossa enclosure now, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about how we play a role in animal conservation as well, and how zoos are really important for animal conservation. So, to have a little chat about some of the really important conservation work that goes on here at Five Sisters Zoo and across all modern zoos, we've come along here to our fossa enclosure. Now, don't worry if you can't see Zazu, our male fossa, behind me just now. We are going to leave you guys with a short clip of him in his enclosure in a few minutes' time. Now, you'll remember from some of the previous lessons that we've made available to you guys, I've spoken a little bit about some of the conservation work that we are involved with here at Five Sisters. We met Seed Madagascar a few weeks ago. That's an organisation that we support. They work over there in Madagascar. They're trying to plant more trees to create forest corridors and help regenerate vital lemur habitat over there in Madagascar. We spoke a little bit about our wildcats as well, and how they're part of a breeding programme that aims to possibly release some wildcat individuals back out into the wilds of Scotland in the next few years. Now, Zazu, our male fossa, he is the only fossa in Scotland at this moment in time, but even although he's in here by himself at the moment, he is part of the international breeding programme for fossas as well. So zoos like Five Sisters play a really, really important role in breeding wildlife that might be considered endangered, vulnerable, critically endangered, or even least concern in some cases. Just because an animal is listed by an organisation called the IUCN as least concern does not mean that we can just completely forget about it. There still needs to be lots of work that will go into assessing populations and making sure that those populations are not in decline. Now, fossas, like Zazu that lives in this enclosure behind me just now, they come from over in Madagascar, just like lemurs do. They're completely endemic to that island, so it's the only place on Earth where they're going to be found living in the wild. And in Europe, there is now a breeding programme that runs between various different zoos, and Zazu is part of that breeding programme. And if he is ever the kind of correct match for another fossa, it may very well be the case that in years to come Zazu is used as part of that breeding programme to help create more fossas, which is a really, really important thing for zoos to be involved with, because if there's ever the need to try and release individuals out into native habitats in the future, we would have the ability to do that, and that's why these captive breeding programs are so important, because they help to boost population numbers within zoos, and they can really help with population numbers in the wild at some points in time as well. So they are really, really important. And here at Five Sisters, we're involved with a number of different captive breeding programs. We've mentioned our wildcats, we've mentioned that Zazu is part of that breeding program. We have animals like our Saki monkeys that are also part of a breeding program as well. Now, we don't breed with Zazu, obviously, he's here by himself. We don't breed with our Saki monkeys either. We are what is known as a holding facility. So obviously these animals still need homes. They are part of those breeding programs. They're not breeding at this moment in time, but they still need to live somewhere, and that's where we step in and offer homes to these species. And that is still a really vital role for some zoos to play within these breeding programs. And it is so important that these programs exist to ensure that some species do not go completely extinct in the wild. And zoos have proven time and time again just how important they are when it comes to wildlife conservation. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head up to our bear enclosure. Now, something that we've become quite well known for here at Five Sisters that I've not mentioned yet today is animal rescue. We've already spoken a little bit about Henk and Esso, two of our bears, and how we help to rescue them. We're going to go up and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the history of animal rescue work here at Five Sisters. So now we've had the opportunity to mention some of the conservation work that Five Sisters Zoo are involved with, and zoos across the world are really at the forefront of wildlife conservation. We've had a bit of a discussion about the animal welfare side of things and how that is really the most important thing for any modern zoo, making sure that the animals under our care are well cared for, and that they are living in really kind of well designed habitats that are also educational for the visitors that come along and visit Five Sisters or any other zoo that they might choose to go along to. So we've come across to our bear enclosure now to have a bit of a chat about the animal rescue side of things. Animal rescue and rehabilitation is something that zoos across the world are very involved with as well, and we are really proud of the animal rescue work that we've taken part in here at Five Sisters Zoo. And some of you guys at home will already know what animals live in the enclosure behind me here just now, because we've already visited this enclosure a couple of times in our live lessons. This is our bear enclosure, or our bear forest, or woods I should say, because you can see it's quite large. It's a lovely big temperate forest that they have in there to live in. We do currently have one European brown bear, but since 2012 we have housed 5 different bears in this enclosure. So we've had Carmen, Susie, Peggy, Henk and Esso, and we still have Esso here today. Now, Carmen, Susie and Peggy, they were the first bears to arrive here in 2012. They had been housed in a circus trailer, believe it or not, for the majority of their lives before they were rescued, taken to a Belgian rescue centre called the Nature Help Centre, and then they were relocated over here permanently in 2012. Unfortunately, all 3 girls have passed away. They were all in their mid to late 20s when they arrived with us here, and for a European brown bear, anything over the age of 25, and they're doing really well. But they came here, they spent the last few years of their life living in this fantastic forest environment where they were able to forage for food, where they were able to build day beds, they were able to act like bears. And that was the whole purpose of us designing this enclosure here, for bears to come along and act naturally again after they've been living in some of the worst conditions possible. In 2018, Henk and Esso arrived. They were kept in a very small caged compound outside a roadside restaurant of all places before being rescued again by the Nature Help Centre and brought to us here. We worked with the Nature Help Centre in 2015 to help relocate the 4 rescued ex-circus lions, and in 2019 we also worked with them yet again in order to rehome 2 amazing snow leopards, which we showed you guys in one of our first videos, all about habitats and adaptations. You'll remember from that video we had a bit of a chat about our 2 female snow leopards. They were rehomed to us here at Five Sisters Zoo. They faced a fairly uncertain future before being rehomed here. So we are really proud of all the animal rescue and the rehoming work that we have been able to get involved with over the years, and it is certainly something that we aim to continue. It is something that we are really excited to continue. Providing fantastic habitats, fantastic welfare for species and individuals is just, it's an amazing thing to see. Seeing the bears, seeing the lions, being outdoors, enjoying this space that they've never had before was incredible, and we hope to be able to do that for as many individuals in the future as possible. Now we're coming to the end of today's lesson. We've spoken about the role of a zoo. We've mentioned conservation. We've mentioned education a little bit. We're going to come back to that on Thursday in a little bit more detail. We've mentioned animal rescue, and we've mentioned animal welfare. Zoos are really important places, and I can't get across absolutely everything I would like to in this very short lesson because there's so many complexities, there's so much to talk about, and I totally urge you guys to go away and look into this more. Have a little look at examples of what zoos have done for wildlife conservation. In fact, some of our activities are designed to make you go away and do just that. Now, I'm going to finish today's lesson just by briefly mentioning something that we're going to come on to in more detail on Thursday. Over the last sort of year and a half, Five Sisters Zoo have been involved in a really exciting conservation project, and we're going to hear from a coordinator of that project on Thursday, in Thursday's lesson, and that's to do with beavers. So something slightly different from the bears, to do with beavers. So beavers, they did live here in Scotland many years ago before they went extinct, and they have been brought back. So in the last sort of 15 years they've been brought back to Scotland, and they've been reintroduced, and there's now something called a beaver mitigation scheme where beavers are moved from Scotland down to official projects in England, and before they move down south they stop off here to get their health checks done. So they get health screening here at Five Sisters, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that project on Thursday, but it is something that we're really excited to be involved with. So thank you very much for tuning in today, guys. I look forward to seeing everybody on Thursday, where we're going to talk a little bit more about the different roles within a zoo and the different things that staff members will get up to. So thank you very much for joining. Enjoy the activity sheet, and we'll see you all on Thursday.